Often considered to be among the greatest WrestleManias in WWE history, WrestleMania X7 featured numerous memorable matches and moments. From the sheer insanity of the second TLC match to the hard-hitting action of Undertaker and Triple H's first showdown at WrestleMania, the night was capped off by a stellar main event that ended in a shocking alliance between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon. In many ways, WrestleMania 17 was a final farewell to WWE's iconic Attitude Era. However, one notable match from the show chose to pay tribute to an even earlier time in the company's history. Featuring 19 past stars from WWE's Golden Age and New Generation era, the Gimmick Battle Royal was a callback to the more cartoonish and child-friendly period of WWE's programming in the early to mid-90s. Considered by some to be a harmless bit of fun and by others to be a complete booking disaster, few matches have been as polarizing as the Gimmick Battle Royal. Let's take a look at the match itself and its participants. This is one of the voices of Weird Wrestling Trivia, and this is the weirdest match in WrestleMania history. Before the match began, Bobby the Brain Heenan and Mean Gene Okerlund were brought out to do commentary, adding further to the old school atmosphere of the Battle Royal. While Heenan would never have a full-time position in the wrestling business again, Mean Gene would soon be signed to a rare lifetime contract with the WWE. Following the introduction of the commentary team, the first pair of people out were the Bushwhackers. Last seen in the company in the mid-90s, they were a veteran team who had the WWF heydays fairly late in their careers. The Bushwhackers were one of the earliest acts to adapt to WWF's more cartoonish Golden Age, shedding their violent sheep herders gimmick for the comedic, family-friendly Bushwhackers they were known best for. At the time, Luke and Butch were still semi-regularly involved in independent promotions. Out next was Duke the Dumpster Drozy. First appearing in 1994, Drozy was one of many infamous occupational gimmicks common in the earlier days of the New Generation era. Drozy would spend only around 2 years on WWE's roster, with his biggest achievement being a win against Triple H. Interestingly, Drozy's Garbage Man character was not given to him by the company, but was rather a creation of his own that he used prior to joining the WWF. Next out was the Iron Sheik. One of only 2 former WWF champions in the match, the Iron Sheik had multiple tenures with the company. During his first run, he became a world champion and later a tag team champion at the very first WrestleMania. He would later be repackaged as Colonel Mustafa in the early 90s, before returning in 1996 under his old name for a brief stint as a manager. Although semi-active in the wrestling business at the time, Sheik had noticeable difficulties walking to the ring that night, something that would affect the outcome of the Battle Royal. Earthquake was the next man out. Portrayed by the late John Tenta, Earthquake's first run of the WWF was extremely eventful. Feuding with top stars including Hulk Hogan himself, Earthquake would later become a tag team champion as well. Tenta had actually been on the full-time WWF roster until just about 2 years prior to the Gimmick Battle Royal, performing as Golga of the Oddities. It was also during Earthquake's entrance that Iron Sheik's mobility problems were becoming more apparent, as he had yet to even make it to the ring. Next out was the Goon. Yet another one of the new generation's infamous occupational gimmicks, the Goon was meant to be a hockey player turned wrestler. Portrayed by veteran wrestler Wild Bill Irwin, the Goon last appeared on WWF TV in 1998 under his real name. It was rumored that the character of the Goon was originally intended for Chris Jericho had he joined the company in 1996. Doink the Clown was out next. Initially portrayed by Matt Bourne, Doink was first presented as a vicious heel and wrestling's equivalent of the Joker. Working alongside top stars such as Bret Hart and Randy Savage, things changed for the Doink character after Bourne was fired. Now presented as a harmless comedy gimmick, Doink was last seen in the WWF in 1997. Doink was portrayed by Ray Apollo on this night. Apollo was the first and most prominent person to play the babyface Doink after Bourne left the company. Too bad he didn't have Dink or any of his other sidekicks with him that night. Like the Bushwhackers before them, Kamala and Kim Chi came out as a team too, and were accompanied by their manager Harvey Whippleman. Kamala had 2 stints with the WWF, in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. During this time, the Ugandan giant faced top stars like Hulk Hogan and even fought The Undertaker in the first ever casket match. Following a short stint in WCW, Kamala was semi-retired. His trainer Kim Chi was portrayed by Steve Lombardi, the man who is better known as the Brooklyn Brawler. While the Brawler gimmick may have been a good fit for the match too, Lombardi was still a semi-regular fixture on weekly WWF TV. Often seen in backstage segments and wrestling the occasional match, the masked Kim Chi character helped with the match's nostalgic elements. Their manager Harvey Whippleman had been with the company since 1991 and held both on-screen and backstage roles. Whippleman was last seen on TV about a year prior to Mania 17, where he infamously won the Women's Championship. One of the company's longest tenured employees, Whippleman is one of the few people from this match who is still with the WWE today. Out next was the Repo Man. Portrayed by Barry Darsow, Repo Man had a stellar run as Smash from Demolition. At the time, Demolition still held the record as the longest reigning tag team champions in WWF history. However, following the end of Demolition's run, Darsow was given the bizarre Repo Man gimmick. After leaving the WWF for WCW, Darsow was somehow given an even worse gimmick where he portrayed a golfer. It honestly took quite a lot to make the Repo Man seem like the better option. Jim Cornette was the next man out. At the time, Cornette was one of the few entrants to still be affiliated with the WWF. He held a number of roles in the company, including being a manager, doing commentary, and even had a position in WWF's creative team. However, Cornette himself was not a wrestler, and rarely worked matches even during his active on-screen career. Thus, he spent most of the match working alongside fellow non-wrestler Brother Love. Nikolai Volkov came out next, making his first WWF appearance in almost 5 years. Initially a hated anti-American heel, Volkov won the tag titles at WrestleMania 1 with the Iron Sheik. Volkov would later turn face in the later stages of his career. After leaving WWF in 1992, Volkov returned briefly in 1994 as part of Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation and would then go into semi-retirement. Coming out to a noticeable reaction was Michael P.S. Hayes. A far less cartoonish gimmick than most of the other entrants, Hayes was a bona fide legend who made a career as the leader of the Fabulous Freebirds. Hayes had stepped away from in-ring competition for many years and worked as WWF announcer Doc Hendricks. He then reverted back to his more popular name for a brief stint as the manager of the Hardy Boys. Hayes is also a producer for the company, a role he maintains to this day. The Gimmick Battle Royal is Michael Hayes' only WrestleMania appearance and his last ever match on record. Following Hayes was the One Man Gang. Unlike the other entrants in the match, the One Man Gang was still an active in-ring performer at the time, having had recent runs in both WCW and ECW. Far less colourful than the other entries in the Battle Royal, the One Man Gang was meant to enter the match as the cartoonish Akeem character. However, he ended up entering under his current gimmick after it became apparent that he had lost too much weight to fit into Akeem's costume. The Gobbledygooker made its way out next. A candidate for one of the worst gimmicks in wrestling history, the Gooker was meant to serve as a mascot for the company. Portrayed by Hector Guerrero, this was the character's first appearance in over a decade and Guerrero's only televised match for the WWF. Tugboat was out next. Portrayed by Fred Ottman, Tugboat had a decent run in WWE, first as a face and later as the villainous typhoon of the natural disasters. However, he would forever live in infamy following his WCW run as the Shockmaster. Had this match not been a tribute to WWF's past, the Shockmaster would have been the perfect gimmick for a light-hearted match such as this. Out next was Hillbilly Jim. Despite having not wrestled for close to a decade at this point, Jim was in noticeably great shape. In fact, his appearance remained virtually unchanged from his Golden Age heyday. Hillbilly Jim was last seen on TV in the mid-90s as the manager of the Godwins, but remained in the company behind the scenes as an agent and ambassador. Brother Love was the second to last entrant. Another non-wrestler, Brother Love was a parody of many popular televangelists. An outspoken heel, he was best known for hosting the Brother Love show and for being The Undertaker's original manager. While the Brother Love character became less prevalent following the New Generation era, Bruce Pritchard has remained an influential backstage figure in WWE today. The final man out was Sergeant Slaughter. Both a popular WWF superstar and an overall pop culture icon, Slaughter was the second of two former world champions to compete in the match. At the time, Slaughter was still a somewhat regular fixture on WWF TV. First working as the on-screen commissioner, Slaughter continued to appear in backstage segments and work the occasional match. Coming out to a notable ovation, he seemed like the favourite to win the Battle Royal. As soon as Slaughter made his way into the ring, the bell rang and people started getting tossed out almost immediately. You were then left with the bizarre final four of Brother Love, Hillbilly Jim, Sergeant Slaughter and the Iron Sheik. Interestingly, Sheik would win the match, and even more surprisingly, was greeted with respectful applause from the crowd. However, he would soon be laid out by Sergeant Slaughter, who led the crowd into USA chants, supposedly to keep everyone happy. It would later be revealed that Sheik's mobility problems were so severe that he could not physically be thrown over the top rope. Left with no choice, the company was forced to let him win the match instead. All in all, the match lasted just around 4.5 minutes and WWE has yet to feature a similar sort of match at WrestleMania ever again. Never short on strange characters and gimmicks, perhaps it's time for a second gimmick battle royal at WrestleMania.